all religions are a failure. This is somewhat a response to Christian, aka Artfantasies, a video he put out maybe 2 or 3 videos back. I was going to write in the comment section on it, and I didn't get back to doing it. I kind of hate to go back now because the comment section kind of gets dead. You know, everybody's the normal gang who watches his videos has already watched that video. You're not going to see my comment. Of course, Christian would. But I'm going to answer a response to his video and to his comments back to me, back to my comments in this video. Plus, I'm going to throw in some other little things. First of all, let me go back to a whole different train of thought here. There was an old story, something they tell to kids to simplify things, that, or maybe I heard it more in New Age circles, I don't know. But the story goes something like this, where God produced all these, got lonely, produced all these offspring, all these other entities, little separations of himself. But he found them all getting kind of spoiled and lazy. They didn't like to do anything. Didn't have any challenges. So we cast them off to this physical world where we have to learn the hard way, and it's more about tempering. The gist of the story was more about tempering of character, more about tempering the ego, the character of the person, to get rid of the small, self-centered, negative self, and to make a more generous, I guess, more, someone understands the whole. Anyway, they get back to what his video was about, and one of the replies to his video, I wrote a little thing about a crucible. Earth was never meant to be a pleasurable place. It's a crucible for us, and for us to boil off the dross, scrape off the dross, and end up with a purified metal. And he said, "What's the metal?" Well, obviously the metal's soul. If you want to use that concept. And soul is a really problematic concept in itself. And the more you dive into things, the more you'll see that. Frankly, I've been mostly, I'm not really into Buddhism in one regard. In other regards, I am. Certainly, it's kind of the unreligion. Just like 7-Up is the uncola, Buddhism is kind of the unreligion. It doesn't really have a dogma, although people are, always going to try to make a dogma. One thing in Buddhism they said is that there is no soul, or there may not be a soul. Now, Buddhism puts points out. Points are raised. They're not necessarily meant to be taken as dogma. They're meant to be thought about, and explored. Which is why I find it superior to most religions. Again, not perfect, and people have dogma, built up a little bit of dogma around it. And of course it all springs out of Hinduism, which is a very vague catch-all for many, many Indian religions. Alright, so getting back to Christian's original video, he keeps coming up with this concept of having a soul that's not you. To me, your awareness is your soul. How could it be anything else? Awareness is soul. Awareness, your judgment, your moral character, the core being of you is what we call soul. And again, it's a problematic catch-all term, but he still wants to go, and and he's welcome to believe whatever he wants. I know Teresa and I have both several times, said to him, well, there is no such thing as an oversoul or a soul that is separate from us. He has this concept of some soul that you're totally detached from, way up in the clouds somewhere. I'm not really sure how that works. It's kind of a... to me, Christian's problems are that he studied a lot of things, but he's mostly anchored into the Judeo-Christian concept, which really, if you look at the metaphysics of it, doesn't really answer much. It doesn't really give you any concrete answers. It gives you a lot of do's and don'ts, mostly from Paul in the New Testament. I won't get into all that. Mainly I would chuck both books. Certainly there's value in some of the New Testament books, and there's value in some of the Old Testament books. But as a blueprint to live your life by, and all the other things people say about it, I don't know. Lives as an amusement for the creator. Well, I suppose if you used that other... this is another Christian's points. And, I reject that. And it's really hard to explain why. I guess I'm going to make an attempt, though. I guess my main argument with Christian, not Christianity, but the user Christian Artfantasies, my main argument with him is he sees everything in separates. And you really got to learn the law of one. And I've been watching a lot of Scott Mendelker's videos, which are pretty heady stuff. He teaches on the law of one. And, that's pretty common thought in New Age, actually, teachings. But there really is only one soul. There really is only one existence. There is only really one spirit. And the illusion, the Maya, is that we are separate individuals. So maybe we are God's amusement, if you want to drop back a few layers of sophistication. He's entertaining himself, I guess that was his Christian thought, and I guess you could kind of argue that. It really gets away from the central core of it, though. I don't know if any of us can explain what God is. I've said that in numerous videos. Or that it, I even doubt whether God has a personality of his own, individual self, separate from the rest of us. A mind separate from the rest of us. I'm not sure that's true. For me, the most illustrating thing is fractals. Let's see if I skipped anything real quick here. Yeah, I'm going into his concept of presetting. He's saying, we're all predestined anyway, blah, blah, blah. He keeps going up with that thought. And like Teresa said to him, it's not about the stars determining what's going to happen to your life. It's not causation, it's correlation. And I guess to Christian it still seems like, well, even if it is correlation, it's still a blueprint for my life. Well, yeah, that's semantic arguments, I guess. My big problem, illustration I want to make real briefly is on fractals. You take a formula, you take a principle, and you can draw these nature paintings, electronically, using a fractal pattern that repeats itself. And the little patterns become big patterns, made up of the little patterns, and the little patterns are made up of littler patterns. Well, that's kind of what the whole thing is. We are all one, and we all are from a master pattern. It's much like Alan Watts said, the earth just peoples. An apple tree grows apples. The earth just peoples, it just grows things. We all have a very common core. If you look at our DNA, it's all based on the same kind of fractal pattern. So of course the universe is just a big fractal, made up of little fractals. And that's the whole purpose of astrology. Astrology is just a picture, it's just your baby picture. It's a picture of what the universe was when you were born. Laid out in their garb of charts and everything. And of course, I'm not very sophisticated in astrology. I've gotten what I want out of, I really can't see much, I don't have much interest in trying to predict what's going to happen to myself. I guess it's interesting once in a while. It's more interesting in retrospect to me, to read a prediction and see how it panned out, or how accurately they get personality traits. And I do find that astrology does do a fairly decent job on personality traits. I know a lot of people will totally take issue with that and say it's total bunk. But enough of that. My other friend, in response to John here, he keeps asking about consciousness and the survival of consciousness and the nature of consciousness, and that's really a tough nut to crack. But it all goes to the same thing here. It's all one. And it sounds like a loose, easy thing to say. You really got to maybe go spend a few dozen hours watching Scott Mandelker videos. You might understand his law of one. And I'm not exaggerating. You could spend hundreds of hours watching his videos if you look at his channel there. Most of his videos are over an hour long. And he's got hundreds of them. But the law of one, I'm not even going to try to capsulize it at this point. Maybe later. But look it up, study it if you want to try to get a glimpse of what it's really about, in my opinion. I can't say anybody's opinion on religion is wrong. If you want to cling to the Judeo-Christian image of a God on a throne, who passes judgment and is going to condemn you for this or that, even though it's predestined, that's Christian's give or take there that he's struggling with. I don't struggle with that. There is no predestination in mind. There's a correlation to the whole, and it's not like you're not part of this universe. It's not like your force isn't part of it. It doesn't have an influence. Back to John though. Survival of consciousness. Well, that's something that was bothering me for quite a while. He's talking more about the nature of consciousness itself, and that's a $6 million question. That'd be an Alan Watts or Ram Dass or somebody if I could capsulize that in nice clean language for you. But the survival of consciousness is something that's troubled me a little bit. Are we just a wave in the ocean, as Buddhism kind of sometimes has been, put in Zen ideas? Are we merely a wave that appears in the ocean and then eventually merges back into the ocean? And is that wave, equivalent to our lifetime, or is that equivalent to a whole batch of lifetimes in which we're, for lack of better words, evolving? Well, that's the question. And looking into it deeper, it really bothered me because I want to see survivability of the individual. Does the individual survive after death in some way or form? A lot of Buddhist thinking is no, different aspects of yourself get reused. Well, that's more like the ocean, where the matter that was the wave is now in the ocean. It's going to reappear as other waves. It may not appear as the same, some of the atoms from this wave may be in different waves. They're going to reappear and merge into the ocean again. And I guess my trouble with that is really a matter of ego. And if you look at it deeply enough, you can see, what does it really matter ultimately? I guess you want some purpose to your life, to all the struggle and all the work you've done in this life. You want some purpose, some gain out of it. Rather than trying to reform the whole, you want to reform yourself. Again, though, it's all really one thing. So despite egos, and of course I always use ego in these videos in a rough, non-Freudian sense, it shouldn't offend my ego. Am I improving for myself or am I improving for society? I guess the society in general would think more about the whole and about doing for everybody, doing for the whole, not doing for themselves. In a lot of ways, we'd have a better planet, rather than people, greedily polluting and poisoning everybody else just to make a little extra money for themselves. Well, let's not go there either right now. So I'm going to leave it at that for now. I guess if you wanted to push me from my opinion, I would say individuality does survive to at least some extent after death. But ultimately, as we gain spiritually and, lack of better words, become more powerful. That's not really a good word, though. Not about power. It's about grasp of the whole. It's about a viewpoint. Getting out of your own narrow little, greedy little, selfish little viewpoint and seeing it more from the mountaintop. Seeing it more from the cloud. And realizing that you aren't just one little, greedy little, separate little piece of the whole thing. You're part of the whole, and you're working for the good of the whole. I'm still not really putting it right. So my hybrid opinion of it is that individuality does survive, but eventually you do merge with the whole. It may be a whole course of lifetimes. Transmissions to higher dimensions. And the whole dimension thing's just another false kind of, and everything we can say about God or reality or consciousness is going to be false. It's above our canon, it's above our language. But to use that model, for lack of better models, as we rise up in dimensions and become more sophisticated, more simple, more one-spirited, more of the whole and less of the individual, we are slowly merging back into the ocean.